Roll call, please, Ann.
Commissioner Gandy?
Here.
Commissioner Sanchez?
Here.
Commissioner Butcher?
Here.
And Mayor Trujillo.
Here. Commissioner Butcher, would you lead us in prayer and pledge?
Here, bow here, please. Our Heavenly Father, Lord, we want to thank you for this day, Lord. Thank you for letting us all wake up and see it, Lord. Lord, and we just ask that you bless the city and all of its employees, Lord. They may keep and guide us in the right direction. And Lord, just bless all those families that are sick and not able to take care of themselves. Lord, bless those as they're in harm's way. And bless those who are just taking care of this country, Lord. Once again, Lord, bless this city and the commission and the staff, that we may continue on to do the city's work. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I
Salute the flag of the state of New Mexico. It is the symbol of perfect friendship among united cultures.
Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Make a motion that we approve the agenda.
We're going to make changes.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to amend ordinance 559 from the agenda, and also to remove resolution 2018-28.
Do I have a second?
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. We have a motion to consider the regular meeting minutes of March 26, 2018.
I make that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, Commissioner and staff reports. Do you want to speak for Wyatt today, James? Anything you want to add?
No, sir. Actually, we'll just cover that in the road report.
Okay. Gary?
Well, if I may, your mayor and commission, I'm very pleased to now announce the fact that we've scheduled our budget workshop meeting for April 19th, and we'll be here in the commission chamber so we can stream some video. So I'm looking forward to seeing you all here and going over our budget. And thanks to some diligent work from our city manager, I think we have a real good budget to present to you.
Appreciate that. Brianna?
Nothing to report, sir.
Anna?
Nothing to report, sir.
Commissioner Arthur Sanchez?
Nothing to report except I'm here.
Commissioner Butcher?
I guess I could address this to James. And I just want to tell you, James, the city employees there that's taking care of the cemetery out there, I wanted you to, pass it on to those that are doing that work. They're doing an awesome job out there putting in the sprinklers. It's looking nice now. I can actually go out there and visit parents and whoever else I want to visit. But they're doing an awesome job, and they're also taking care of the other parks very well.
Yes,
That's
sir.
it.
Thank you. I have nothing to report. Commissioner Gandy?
I'm good.
Chief David?
Nothing to report, sir.
Chief
Nothing to report, sir.
James?
Nothing, sir.
Patrick?
Let's keep it going.
There we go.
Maybe I should have spoken.
Okay. Public comment. Anybody have any wise words they want to tell the commissioners or the public?
Hi, Leslie Everson with the Chamber of Commerce. I just wanted to give a couple updates. We have a Workers' Comp 101 for businesses this Thursday at 4 o'clock. It's in a partnership with the New Mexico Workers' Compensation, and it's free to help the businesses learn what they need to know to protect themselves, find out seasonal employees are considered workers, family members, that kind of thing. We're very glad that they're coming over here to Lovington, and there's some free posters also for them. Also, on April 30th, we are partnering with Main Street on branding your business. So we have another really valid workshop coming in. So we're excited about that, and we'll give you another update next time. Also, this weekend, we had our Spring Classic barrel race that came to Lovington and brought over 60 racers. We developed a survey that we could use to identify the economic impact of events such as the barrel race to the city, and hopefully by this time next year we'll have some numbers, but we saw them at Drylands and we saw them filling up and stuff, so I think it was really a great race. So that's all my comments. Thank you.
Did you see anything that we need to do on our part that we may have missed?
On the barrel race?
Yeah, during the activities over the weekend.
No, I think it was great. I really enjoyed seeing you and Bernard out there. We also had a booth at the Laces, so it was nice. It was kind of funny going from one event over to the other, which were so different, but they look like really, we had a great race. We shouldn't have called it spring, we should have called it winter and summer, but it was a really good event, and I think, I can't speak for the people that put on Laces, but it looked like everyone was having a great time over there too. So
that's great.
Yeah, thank you
so much. Anybody else? Be hiding out over there, Dave. I see you. when your face is red, I know you want to stand up.
Yeah. All right. I was going to give everybody else a chance first, so I'm going to Dave Rouser, and I had a couple questions. I'm going to beat a dead horse, but I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to do so. So, Patrick, can I seek your wise guidance and counsel?
Maybe.
All right. Well, just say whatever you want to say. All right. I just have a few questions, and so for clarification on my part, because I want to acknowledge that I don't know what I don't know. All right. So, but I want to have these questions answered. So, for instance, with the City Commission, when it grants a variance to, let's say, Mr. Jones for a carport that is located on an easement that it belongs to the city, that's not supposed to be there, but denies another person, say Mr. Smith, because he wants to do the exact same thing, exact same parameters, citing the ordinances, would this be considered a discriminatory act?
Well, that's a, I don't know if I can answer that without having an actual fact pattern in front of me.
Well, we're just going to say everything's identical. One person's granted, another person's not.
That'd be, I think, a determination that a court would have to make. That particular determination that it is discriminatory. Because you could look at a number of different factors. You could take a look at, for example, whether the variance was inside certain zones that we have, whether it was in a part of a downtown area versus residential. It could have an impact on, for example, a similar type of request, but where you had neighbors in one instance agreeing that they do not object to a variance, and neighbors in another area objecting to the variance. So, it'd be like, without a specific fact pattern and all the other details in there, it'd be really hard to say. But I could certainly see where someone would, maybe look at something like that and say, hey, this is based on something other than what council may take into consideration, or planning and zoning may take into consideration. But there are a lot of other factors that go into granting or not granting.
Okay, so it's a very legalistic answer.
Mr. Maybe also consider this, that maybe it was already grandfathered in.
Well, I'm just saying they're both in violation, but one is granted, one is not. And I'm trying to make it as identical as possible. So we're going to say Mr. Jones and Mr. Smith live right next door to each other. They're in the same subdivision. The houses are identical, max same square feet, but they both want to build a carport that exceeds the parameters set forth by the ordinances, or they install one that exceeds the ordinances. And so one person does it, they're given the ordinance, the other person comes in, asks for variance because their neighbor got it, but they're denied because it's cited in the ordinance that they're not allowed to have it. I guess my question is that when we act in a manner where we don't, where we violate our own policies and ordinances, and we do it in a consistent manner, where we're constantly granting variances to everything that comes before the commission, are we not setting a precedent that every variance will be granted?
Well, I don't think that granting a variance is violating some of the ordinances that we have. And for example, a variance is something that's pretty common. The requests are common. They may be commonly granted. And so the fact that you grant that variance is not a violation of some ordinance that we have. It's a process for an individual to ask for an exception to a certain set of rules that are out there that deal with issues of setbacks, for example, other zoning issues, those types of things. So I think that if you were to take a look at the exact same fact pattern, and I think that it's difficult to put that together because you have two different pieces of property. So right there's some facts at least that are a little bit different in this scenario. But if that's something that's occurring on a regular basis, I think it's something that we would need to look at, planning and zoning would need to look at, where you have similar type requests and you have similar type of facts enough that they can't be the same perhaps, but are pretty close. That may be something to take a look at. But I don't know if the fact that Mr. Smith or Mrs. Jones requests something and one gets a variance and the other doesn't would be based on discrimination. It could be some other type of fact that's relevant to Mr. Smith or Mrs. Jones about setting, wherever that might be.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay. So my fear. Okay. So this is where I'm going to shorten it because of the answer that was given. What I'm afraid of is that by consistently granting variances to our ordinances and for means outside of the stipulations that the ordinance is written for, okay? So what we do is we act in a way that is capricious, willy-nilly. I like you, so I'm going to give you the variance. I don't really care about you, so I'm not going to give you the variance. My fear is that we would set up a pattern where someone could come in and file litigation against the city and saying, well, my neighbor over here is breaking the law in this capacity, and why can't I break it over here? Why can't I violate this ordinance? You let him get away with it. Why can't I do it here?
I think there's a difference between Mr. Smith coming in and saying, I want a variance for a carport, and not getting it, and Mrs. Jones coming in and requesting a carport variance and getting it. That's the scenario we started with. I don't think that's the same as saying my neighbor's breaking the law, so I should be able to break the law.
Okay, well,
kind of like the speeding.
I know.
I haven't been pulled over, and I'm probably going to jinx myself, but I haven't been pulled over in 15 years. But if I say to the officer, everybody speeds here, he or she is going to say, well, I just happened to catch you today.
Okay.
So I don't know if that's the example you're really trying to make, because you're correct. If Mr. Smith is violating the law and Mrs. Jones is violating the law, aside from requesting a variance, that's something that they both need attention from either code enforcement or law enforcement, separate and apart from who knows who. But as far as the variance requests that we get, I don't think they're necessarily dealt with in a willy-nilly fashion, because each one of those requests is reviewed by staff. Sometimes staff, at least in my experience, advises that a variance should be granted. Sometimes they don't. It's a lot of different situations, but in every instance I'm aware of, they're brought before planning and zoning and discussed. That person's given the opportunity to present their side of the story. Staff presents theirs, what their recommendation is. If there's members of the public or neighbors, because sometimes we have neighbors show up. The last one I can think of is on a modular home, and whether the foundation should be dug down and set deeper or not. The neighbor showed up and talked about it a little bit, and so I would have to disagree that they're evaluated in sort of a off-the-cuff kind of situation.
Well, I guess
I could, if somewhere existed the exact same fact pattern, and I don't know if you can do that because properties are located at different settings. But
if there is some exact same fact pattern, or there's some pattern that you recognize where staff is looking at some individuals get preferential treatment than others, then certainly we would need to take a look at that.
Mm-hmm.
And if that exists, I'm more than happy to look at it. I'm sure the council is too, but I haven't been made aware of anybody that says, you know, Mrs. Smith gets the variances, Mr. Jones never gets the variances, or vice versa, or you know, if they're based on any other, you know, qualifying condition of whether it's Mr. Smith, Mrs. Jones, or anybody else that lives, you know, in Lovington as a property owner. So.
Well, my greatest fear was that we would have some type of litigation against us in the perception that these things exist, and that's what I was asking for clarification. So that's all I needed to know.
We appreciate your concern, Dave. Anybody else? Moving on to non-action items. James?
Mayor, Commissioners, we have Brad Hanks with GK Bond to discuss the 2018 bond series.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. Good to be back in Lovington. I'm Brad Angst with George K. Baum & Company, part of our New Mexico Public Finance Group out of Albuquerque, New Mexico. We've been working with staff for several months now to develop a plan of finance to finance your new firehouse and a couple other smaller projects. Wanted to take you through our process today and tell you what the outlook is looking like for the structure. I'm going to start with the debt profile that talks about some of the historical numbers here in Lovington and some of the sources that we use to come up with your debt capacity, as well as some of your other operational mill levies. There in the top left-hand corner is a historical look at your assessed valuation. What we refer to as your tax base. That's going to be your residential, non-residential, any commercial type units. We've seen a pretty steady growth pattern here in the city over the past few years. This is looking from 2013 to 17 with an average of 4% here this past year up to 11% going from 15 to 16. Now, this is what would be used on your property tax or your mill levy. This is not what's going to back the firehouse, which is GRT, but wanted to give you a little bit of this information as far as the economics here in the within the city. There on the right-hand side is your bonding capacity. Should you want to go out for GO bonds, GO bonds being ad valorem backed or property tax backed, the city has 4.1 of capacity in that regard. And then in the bottom right is your historical tax rates. You've been right at 5.6 mills here the last 5 years. And 1 mill equates to 1/1000th. So $1 for every $1,000 of value. Let's see, on to the next page. Start diving into the historical GRT, or your gross receipts tax. This is what was implemented by the commission in your city back in 2015. There's several different types of GRT. The hold harmless GRT specifically is what is pledged to this firehouse project. We've looked at a historical output on these revenues going back to 15. These are a little more cyclical and go up and down with the oil and gas industry. So we saw a high in 2015, all combined, of 10 million in total revenues. In 17, that dropped to about 6.2. Year to date, we are at 5.8 million. When you annualize that, or you take the rate that's been collected here over the last 8-9 months and you move it out to a year, it's back to about 7.8 million is our estimate, and that's in that top right hand column there. So starting to return. We hear similar things as I work in the area with different cities and school districts and drive around the area. I see a lot of activity. I'm sure y'all see it as well in the oil and gas. A lot more volume ticking up, and we're seeing GRTs up throughout the southeast part of the state. Okay, this Hold Harmless GRT that I referenced here a couple times, y'all implemented it in 2015, and we set it up in a way, the structure of that bond, it was a 15-year bond to where it had a couple of years of the full payment, and then it dropped off in the next years after that, 3 on to the final maturity. The reason for that was so that we could come back and do additional projects for you should you choose to. That way, you have that future capacity, you have this flexibility and these tools to continue to do these projects. It also accomplishes another goal of ours, which is to give you the lowest interest cost possible. And so by front loading some of that debt, you're paying more of your principal up front, which is going to reduce your total interest cost, while also giving us that ability to wrap in or layer on that next project you may choose to do. And that's what's provided us with the capacity here this year to come back and take on another project for your community. Next page, we got the historical numbers again for the GRT. This is broken down by month. Looking at last month's distributions, prior to March was actually the highest we've seen over a 4-year period. We're up to 102,000 on 1 month. This past month was back to 63, which has been more of the average for about the last year. But signs are good. We're starting to see that upward pressure again that I talked about a couple minutes ago. So using these numbers, we take estimates and we project them forward based on those historical values, historical revenues, and we decide, working with investors and with the market and different lenders, how much can you afford? What's a reasonable amount of this total amount that you collect to pledge towards paying off your firehouse? And so with that, we determined about $823,000 was the appropriate amount based on those historical numbers. With that, we are able to produce approximately $3.5 million of project funds to pay for the firehouse and these other smaller projects. Now, with that comes a debt service coverage covenant. So investors want to know that you not only have money to repay these bonds or this loan, they want to know that you have a certain amount above and beyond that. And so for these structures, we have 150% or 1.5 times debt service coverage and an additional bonds test on these securities. And what that means is you have to, if your payment was $500,000, you'd have to show that you had $750,000 of revenue in order to be able to pay that and not break these covenants. So you're going to have a buffer above and beyond the amount of your payment that we're proposing to structure. I'll show you that graphically here in just a couple minutes. So our process, after we talk with your staff, after we consult with our internal underwriting desk, we go out and say, where's the cheapest cost of money we can get for the city? And typically that's a 3-pronged approach. We look at the capital markets, which are going to be where you would go and sell bonds on a publicly offered basis. That's where you have insurance companies, investors in New York, across the country, buying bits and pieces of your bonds here and there. That's traditionally that's your bond sale. That's typically the cheapest cost of capital. It's the most efficient as far as your interest rate. But with that comes some increased transactional cost or cost of issuance, because you have to hire a bond counsel to give you a tax exempt opinion. You have to develop an offering document. There's some securities rules and regulations that come along with that. The other option, or another option, is going to commercial banks, whether it be here locally in Lee County, whether it be somewhere else in the state, or even nationally. So we go out and we consult with some of these banks. We ask them for this type of obligation, what type of interest rate can you offer us at this time? What does the structure look like? Are you fine going with that 1.5 debt service coverage number? Do you require a debt service reserve fund, which is a pot of cash that you have to set aside as kind of an insurance policy should you come up a little bit short? So there's a bunch of different factors, and we ask them what their structures would be. The third option is state financing and federal financing opportunities. Here in New Mexico, we have a source of funding through the NMFA, the New Mexico Finance Authority. We have options through the USDA. We have options through Clean Water State Revolving Fund if it was a water project, or the New Mexico Environmental Department. So we go and we talk to all these different sources, and what we have here on page 9 is the matrix that breaks down what is the best option for you currently. And I'll cut to the chase. Right now it's the NMFA. They are offering the lowest rate. They have a little bit of increased issuance costs, or those transactional costs, compared to a commercial bank, but even when you factor that in, it's the lowest cost of capital. We're proceeding, as y'all found out from your counsel that's working with us, Daniel Alsop with the Module Firm last meeting. We're proceeding with the application process. That's been sent in to the NMFA. We will go to their board meeting here at the end of the month to talk to their board. Mr. Chapman will be there alongside us to talk about your projects and talk about the structure that we propose. Now, I brought that up because just a few days before that, the week leading into that, we'll go back and we'll do a follow-up check with the capital markets as well as some of the commercial banks to make sure their rates and structures haven't changed just one last time before we lock you in with that path. If y'all have any questions, please feel free to stop me and ask them as we go through this. So that structure that we are working on and fits your current revenue streams. It's not going to be a tax increase. This fits within your capacity and the old Harmless GRT that you implemented many years back. And it gets you to that number for the projects that you have. Starting in the top left here, you're going to have a par amount of your bonds that's actually $3.9 million. And the reason it doesn't match your project amount of approximately 3.5 is because you have to, the NMFA likes you to have that debt service reserve fund. That's going to be about 10% of the total issuance or project cost, so that's $350,000 roughly, on top of the 3.5 in projects. And then there's some transactional costs with the legal fees and the financial advisory fees that go along with that, as well as the escrow. So based on that total amount, you have your repayment structure that fits your current needs, and it wraps around that existing bond. So we put some, let me show you graphically here. Should I be aimed? There we go. So that blue on the bottom left is your existing bond that y'all issued in 2015 and the debt service that is owed on that. And the green is the new debt service. And so both of these together now, we need to make sure that you don't trip those covenants that I talked about, that 1.5 times, that it meets the revenue stream. And so that's what we have here. We have it structured in a way that maintains those covenants, and it also respects the portion of the hold harmless that goes back to your general fund to replace those food and medical items that the state used to provide for you. So I just wanted to be clear about that. Not only is there a buffer in here for your investors in that there is assurance that there are going to be extra revenues available for their debt. But there's also, this is also net of the payment going back to your general fund of those hold harmless revenues that you used to get from the state. Then finally, I've got the rest of the financing calendar here. We are on track and moving along to get you your funding by late June. Next step with the first reading that y'all are going through now of the ordinance that's going through today. It will be published of your intent to go out to bond against the hold harmless GRT. That'll be put in the newspapers tomorrow. There will be a second publication notice that goes out in another week, and then we'll have that board meeting here at the end of the month up in Santa Fe with the NMFA. About a week to 2 weeks after that, we will lock in your interest rate. And then a week or so after that, we'll look to set up your closing for the end of June. There's a 30-day wait period in between there when we have to set up that closing date and when you can actually get the funding. And that's just a requirement that safeguards the city. Once that 30-day period ends, it is an option during that 30 days for your public to come back and protest should they think anything wasn't done in the correct manner per statute. That's why we employed the Module Sperling law firm and Daniel Alsop that was here with you before. Make sure we do it all the right way. But after that 30-day wait period, the Attorney General comes out and says you're free and clear. So it's kind of the belt and suspenders, just to make sure that there's no clawback or make sure that there's no right of people to come in and file suit. So with that, I'll pause here, give you a chance to ask me some questions, see if I can explain anything else. Yes, sir.
How many years was this loan for?
How long?
Yeah, how many years?
This is a 20-year.
20 years.
20-year, yes, sir. The state of New Mexico allows GRT bonds to go out to 30 years. The useful life of a firehouse is, by the IRS, is 25 to 30 years, so we're inside of those parameters.
No, I'm good with
Okay.
it.
My information, contact information is in the back of the presentation. If you have any questions along the way, please don't hesitate to reach out, let us know, or through staff. We're in frequent contact with them. It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Sir. James?
So I know that Brad had mentioned we had a couple of other projects. These are some of the other projects that we had identified in regards to the bond. And one is the replacement of the irrigation system out at Harold Reynolds. That system is obsolete and broken, but this would upgrade that system. Also complete the evidence facility for the police department with the inclusion of an evidence garage, replacing some fencing out at our baseball and softball complexes, as well as a striping machine for our street department, and some park improvements. We have quite a few trees that we need to replace. We are looking at several options to improve or resurface our basketball courts. We also need to, in order to preserve the pump out at the swimming pool, we do need to expand the shade structure, as well as some miscellaneous equipment out at different parks that we may have. Are you ready to move on to the next item, sir?
Yes, that was part of the bond is what you're
Yes,
saying,
sir.
right? So
Yes, sir.
them items identified will be part of expenditures we will have with the bond, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, just to make that clear. Thank you, James.
So, Mayor and Commissioners, thank you, We have a couple of road projects that are fixing to start in the next 2 weeks, as well as an update on some of the other ones that are still pending. So one of the things that we're doing is an IPR treatment, which I guess you could say is an enhanced chip seal. It's designed to repair and restore the surface of the roadway. We found that Lee County's been using this on some of their county roads, and really for the price, we can actually get about 8 miles of roads done this particular budget year. In addition to that, the budget that we'll be presenting to everybody on our work session on the 19th, we have another approximately $400,000 allocated towards more IPR treatments, and we're hoping to get another 4 to 5 miles done throughout the city. So these were based on the condition with our assessment rating that we completed last year. This is not a full reconstruction, so we won't be installing sidewalks on the particular IPR roadways, with the exception of one. But this project is a little over $500,000 using local tax dollars. So to go over some of these, what this IPR process is, actually, Lee County's been doing this. If you go out to the fairgrounds, the picture on the left, upper left, is actually the fairgrounds parking lot on the eastern side, over by the rodeo arena. And then you can see a picture on the lower right. That's actually what it looks like after the IPR treatment. It adds about 3/8 to 1/2 of an inch of thickness to the top of the roadway. It seals cracks in addition to some of your larger holes. The way this process works, or will work, it will involve the city running our street sweeper down and on any of the larger holes, putting in our hot mix to make sure we try to get as level of a surface as possible. Only takes it's an 8-hour process from start to finish. As far as how we're going to notify the individuals in the affected areas, of course we're going to use social media and our website, as well as our local newspaper, to get the word out as far as what roads, but we are waiting on the schedule from the contractor. He's waiting on some material to come in. The aggregate that they actually used on the county roads is a little bit more coarse than what's actually going to be going down on our residential roads. So we're looking at about 2 weeks. He's supposed to provide us that schedule of roads, and we'll have our project inspector and street department personnel putting the schedule in individuals' mailboxes on the affected residential roads. As far as the roadways that we'll go over here in a few minutes that are in school zones, those will be done on the weekends, more than likely a Sunday. So that way it's ready for business the next school day. But this is actually part of what the process looks like. It's a large truck. You may have seen three of these things in Lovington. I know on Friday they were doing work. They were doing some work today. It looks like a large dump truck with this apparatus on the back. And this is actually video of, it should work. Come on. Fun stuff. All right, well, the video doesn't work, but you can see that this truck actually, it fills that box up and then they just drive. They have some individuals behind it. It does appear brown whenever they first lay it down, but then after about 3 hours, the moisture is starting to wick out of it, and it takes on that black appearance. So one of the first sections that we've got for IPR is First Street from Gum Avenue all the way up to Mesquite, and then Juniper from 3rd Street or Reed Road all the way over to Main Street. Our second section involves multiple. We've got Birch from 9th to 12th, right there in front of Lee Elementary School. We have Aspen that will begin at 9th, and then where Aspen intersects with Polk Avenue. We have 8th Street and 6th Street. Both of those will take it from Polk to Jackson, as well as Gore from 9th over to 6th Street. We then also have Monroe and Madison down there in the lower left-hand corner from 13th to 16th Street. And then Jefferson will get treatment from 9th Street across Main Street over to Eddy. I will address the bad stretch of road from 13th to 17th here in a few minutes. The second area that will be hit with IPR treatments, will be East Van Buren from Lev Street up to Commercial, as well as Adams from Main to Eddy. And then we have another section, Central all the way from 9th Street up to Main Street, Avenue J from 9th to 2nd, and then Love Street from D to Avenue K. And then down on the southern end of town, we'll actually have Avenue H from 9th to 16th, as well as 6th Street, which is right behind the high school and in front of Ben Alexander. 6th Street from Avenue K all the way to Brian Urlacher, and then to also improve our truck bypass, Avenue R, all the way up to roughly the Avenue R apartments. So we're looking at this starting in about 2 weeks. Are there any questions on the IPR treatments? Yes, sir.
How long will these roads last?
These roads will extend the lifespan of them for about, they say 8 to 10 years. However, there's been roads that have lasted longer than that.
And if someone wanted to actually go out and see what they're doing out on 32,
Yes,
they've
sir.
actually, the county has actually done that, and it looks really good. I
Yes,
drove
sir.
on it, and it was really smooth. So
Yes,
they did
sir.
a very good job on that. So that's, if anybody wants to go out and just take a look at that, it's pretty awesome.
Did you say they were going to do Avenue H?
Avenue H from 9th to 16th.
Can we do 13th instead?
We actually have, we'll be creating another.
I'm begging you, please.
We'll actually be
13th.
consulting with each one of you as far as the roadways that we're going to work on after July 1st, as far as the IPR treatments.
Just write me down, please.
Yes, sir. Which, speaking of the road projects, I know what we have in our budget, our interim budget, what we have scheduled right now, we have about $1.9 million in road work slated for next year, to include some of these projects that we're fixing to discuss. So the 17th Street from actually Avenue D up to Jefferson, they are still pouring concrete, finishing out the curb gutter sidewalk. They are getting ready on that first particular phase to also put in the asphalt. They're finishing up that drainage pond. There's no reason to doubt that they won't finish on time. Of course, whenever they get done with the portion that is currently torn up, they will move on to the remaining half to finish it up all the way to Jefferson Avenue. But what we're going to do is we do have some what they call municipal arterial program funds and local government road fund project funds. This is DOT funds that we have access to that for this particular classification of road. Originally, it was complete reconstruction as well as ADA improvements on 17th Street, all the way from Jefferson north to roughly where Dogwood would be, or the new fire station site. Evaluating that roadway, we realized that that road will last a little bit longer than anticipated, because if you look at that initial stretch, that road was in very poor shape. But we can actually do the IPR on this for about $34,000, and then the rest of that money would have to be obligated towards that project, which would go towards drainage as well as sidewalk improvements, especially those going to public facilities. So we'll be working on this one. This project will probably take place a little bit later than the rest of the IPR because it does involve DOT funds. There's certain procedures that we have to make sure that we follow. They're called clearances, making sure we get with the railroad and environmental, just to make sure that those DOT funds are used. So that takes a little bit longer, but we're currently working on that, and we're getting our approvals in day after day. The CDBG, I'm sorry, that's about a $300,000 project. CDBG, I know that we initially wanted to get this project started this month, but we've had some paperwork delays, mainly working with the Department of Finance, local government division, as far as some contract amendments. That took a little bit longer, but this is actually reconstruction, rehabilitation, and ADA improvements for Jefferson from 13th to 17th Street. We also have 2nd Street from Avenue D all the way up to Jackson, and then a section of Avenue H from 5th Street to 2nd Street. We're really hoping that we will get the go-ahead to go to bid by the end of May on this. The plans are at 80% completion. You know, Wyatt and I are doing a review on that. Once we get that review done, the engineer will finalize that, stamp the plans. We then send those plans up to the Santa Fe for them to review, and we're hoping that they'll have no issues with it. They'll also have no issues with our bid packet. We do have to go through a bid process because CDBG funds are federal pass-through funds. So we can't use the CES process. We do have to do a competitive bid. But we go out to bid, and it will probably be about a 60-day process. So I'm really, really hoping that after, by the end of August, beginning of September, we can actually enter into a contract with a contractor. But we're really hoping to get this project done by the end of next fiscal year. We also have a commercial street bypass. We did make our presentation the week of spring break. A very competitive grant process. This is a $1.4 million project that actually the county and the city are partnering on. We're still awaiting the results that have to go through the District 2 engineer since DOT is the granting agency. Very competitive process. The preliminary scoring had the top 2 candidates or top 2 applicants separated by tenths of a point. So we feel that we have a more shovel-ready project because essentially it just takes an engineer stamp on there, and we should be able to get going. But we'll have this project hopefully underway, but really it does hinge on DOT funding at that point. And that's all I have for the roadway update.
What's the total cost of all the road projects that we have going on?
Actually, the road projects that we have going on right now, of course, the IPR is going to be 505 plus 295. So right now we're looking at $700,000 or $800,000, but before the end of this fiscal year, June 30th, and then next year we have budgeted 1.9 million, little almost 1.964.
So probably about 3 mil in the next 2 years.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you, James.
Yes, sir.
Okay, moving on to action items. Do I have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion, Mr. Mayor, Resolution 2018-29, adjustments to city pay grade and classification plan.
Second. A motion and second by Arthur.
Mayor and Commissioners, as we had discussed at the previous meeting, let me fix this. We had discussed the need to also evaluate other city employees' salaries. One of the issues that we have is our starting wage has not been, increased, you would say, in well over a decade. And we're really starting to run into the issues of competing with the private sector. Of course, we won't be able to really directly compete with the private sector or municipalities larger in size. However, we've run an analysis as far as what our estimated GRTs are going to be by the end of year end. We're looking at actually coming in over $1 million more than what we had budgeted. And then next year, of course, looking at the statistics as far as looking at drilling activity and the price of oil and just going over the historical averages on the increase, we still remain very conservative as far as an increase in gross receipts tax expected next year. What we're recommending is that we increase our starting pay by $1.50 an hour. So this would mean instead of an entry-level position coming to work for the city starting out at $12.50 an hour, it bumped them to $14 an hour. Of course, if we increased the starting wage, that means that we need to adjust the pay of everybody else by the same amount, with the exception of the executive staff. The executive staff would not be eligible for this increase, considering what the commission adopted at the last city commission meeting. When you look at what this does to our general fund reserve, should we enact the $1.50, you can see that it only drops our reserve from a 38.1% to 36.26. That's because we've only got the 3 months left in this fiscal year. Now, budgeting on what revenues that we are estimating right now, that would impact our general fund down and keep it still 5.27% above what we had set by resolution at the 20% minimum. I would stand for any questions.
James, I had one question. How are we doing with our insurance going into the new fiscal year for our employees?
Very good news. Our health insurance, our initial budget, and these numbers do reflect this, our initial budget was looking at about a 10% insurance increase. However, it's not. It's only going up 3%. And these numbers do reflect that 3% increase. So that was actually some really good news that we received.
So you're saying that they'll see some of this on their paycheck, not
Yes, sir.
the insurance?
Oh, yes, sir. When you look at 3% overall, if you remember, the city pays 85%, the employee pays 15%. So that 3% increase would not consume these hourly wage adjustments. You would definitely, with that wage adjustment, you would definitely see, the employee would definitely see more take-home pay.
Go ahead.
Give me a few seconds here.
Sure.
Arthur?
I'll give you a couple of weeks to think about it.
So basically, you're suggesting with the increases of the executives plus the increase of the staff, we're taking about a 600 to 700,000 annual increase in wages.
With the $1.50 an hour increase, the general fund would have an annual increase of $369. If you total that up, well, 14, 18, 43, 93. Close, yes, sir.
So, can we work through this? Because I've been giving this some thought, or fuming about it, one of the two. So we're just, for easy math, we've got a $700,000 increase in annual salaries and wages. Typically, we've discussed that the fact that the oil and gas market really doesn't affect our gross receipts as much as we think it does. I mean, it does a little bit, maybe $50,000 a month. But, we were looking at it here a while back when we were looking at it, and varying on the price of oil. Maybe it was the price of oil, not so much the activity, but the price of oil didn't have as a negative effect on us as building construction does. Because when we did have construction going on, we were a lot lower. Oil and gas prices didn't fluctuate as much as the home building and different things like that made. So once we get through with the hospital and the judicial complex and some of the bigger projects we have going on, are we still going to be able to sustain that $700,000 salary increase in 3 to 4 years?
Mayor, Commissioners, Commissioner Gandy, whenever you actually look at that, did I share that spreadsheet with you that goes back to the 2004? There is actually a correlation between the price of oil and our GRT. They fall line in line. Of course, when that drops, it drops. It's not. It almost. I mean, it's very eerily similar as far as when that oil goes up. As far as off the top of my head, what a $1 per barrel or even 50 cents per barrel, what that effect is on the GRT, I don't know off the top of my head. We do have that construction, but really retail is what drives the majority of our gross receipts tax. And believe it or not, construction, yes, this past year construction did supersede, the previous fiscal year, construction did bring in more consistently than the transportation and oil and natural gas. However, that has reversed that trend. In fact, I was doing some looking at historical because everybody here knows it's very cyclical that we've got. So back in the fiscal year 2010, we were looked at an increase in GRT alone of 20%. FY11, 34%. FY12, 13.3. 13, we did see where it started to stabilize, 4.4, and then in 14 it did jump to 10%. But that's whenever we started seeing the decline in activity and the corresponding decrease in GRT. So our predictions for next year are still very conservative. We're not budgeting a 34% increase. That's just unrealistic. We want to make sure that we we do things smart. We're really hoping that GRT comes in and higher that we anticipated, but we do want to remain realistic.
I was just,
Go ahead.
I'm just concerned that, you know, with the bond rating and all this other things going on, that, you know, we take a dip. It's tough to swim.
James, but due to staffing now we're staffed and we don't plan to hire any after a new fiscal year, or how does our new fiscal year play a role in this?
Mayor and Commissioners, then in the new fiscal year, we're actually restoring our budget, which does include these numbers, includes restoring some of the previously frozen positions, which is 2 police officers. I believe it was either in Parks and Recreation, one of those positions, a water department position, which that comes out of a separate fund. I believe it was 1 position in the street department. The 1 position that we are not unfreezing is the assistant city manager, because those duties have been spread out and absorbed by other individuals.
Any other questions from the board? No. Scotty.
Well, I got one question, but you don't have to think too much about it. But if we don't go for this raise, personally, I don't think anybody's going to quit. I think everybody's doing okay right now.
Well, the whole incentive, I guess, behind giving raises is to keep those that has that knowledge and not leaving and having to retrain somebody. That's going to cost the city more. And that's just, you know, my personal opinion, you know. And I think everybody's doing a good job and they deserve a little bit more. You know, asking $1.25 or $1.50 more for starting pay is actually pretty good. That's not an overkill.
It's twice what minimum wage is.
Yeah, but those people, I mean, minimum wage and I don't know, that's.
You got a lot of benefits in there they're picking up too. So, you know, you don't want to get too top heavy.
And the thing about it, for years we've continued to promise, not so much promise, but let our employees know that one day we'd be able to take care of them when it was tough. And that's why I'm in agreement with this, because I remember I was the one that voted the first time no for the race, and pushed no for them years back because times were tough, and I didn't see us being able to afford it. And the last 3 years we've made some changes in how we do business here at the city, and I feel that we can accommodate this now, and a lot has to do with our like for instance where we draw our infrastructure from now. We're no longer pulling that $500,000-600,000 a year from our general fund. And the past 3 years, we have a separate fund allocated for that now. So we're not drawing from there. So, and like I said, we made staff changes and so forth to where we brought down the cost of doing city business. And like I said, I feel comfortable with it. Everything's a risk. I mean, you can always find the flaws in different things you try to do, especially when you're trying to move forward. But I think this is needed for the staff and so forth, our employees, and I think it's well deserved. Yes, sir.
If I may, Mayor, Commissioners, in particular Commissioner Sanchez, in reference to your comment as far as you don't think people will leave, I think they will. When we do see oil field activity pick up, we start losing those experienced personnel. Granted, we offer competitive benefits. Our starting wage is low, as well as the wages that we have compared to the private sector. But we typically will see when this activity, as we see everybody's starting to hire, and people will forego the benefits package that we have to bring home higher take-home pay. In addition, you know, just for example, we've been trying to hire individuals to work in our street department. Granted, it's a truck driver, but I believe that vacancy's been there for about 2 months. And we are simply not recruiting qualified individuals because of our starting wage. That is all I have.
Any other questions? No.
Well, let me say some more. On the, like on that, I was looking at the salaries the other day. I'm just gonna compare by, the last time I was here, in 2012, our city manager was making $85,000 a year. Mr. Layton. And then he left, whatever happened. So now our city manager is making what, $127,000?
Yes, sir.
So that's a pretty good increase. Of course, you're talking about, you're saying the top officials are not going to get a raise. Is that what you're telling me?
Correct. Mayor and Commissioners, yes, sir. The individuals who are given the increase last commission meeting, they are not eligible for this increase.
So say yourself, Mr. Chapman.
Correct.
I don't know on. Chief and chief, they're not eligible for it.
Correct, sir.
So
they are not eligible.
Well, give them a raise.
And can you do a roll call vote, please?
Sure thing, sir. Commissioner Sanchez?
Can I say something else? Just
Go
before?
ahead.
I would rather wait until Paul's here. That way we might have a 2-2 thing here, and that way he could break a tie or whatever. To me, that would be to have us all together to do it or not.
Let's roll with it.
That's
We
my
can do
opinion.
it. Let's get it done.
Well, if it doesn't pass.
Unless we're all united, do it. If not, then let's wait till Paul gets here.
Well, think about it, Arthur, we could, if it doesn't pass tonight, one of the commissioners can place it back on the agenda again.
Yeah.
They have you can do it, Scotty can do it, I can do it, even Paul can do it, if he doesn't see that, what he likes. So it could be placed back on. So I would recommend we just vote on it tonight. And if someone's not happy, they can place it on the agenda again if they so please.
Okay, just don't ask me to go first.
Yes, sir. Commissioner Butcher?
Yes.
Commissioner Gandy?
No.
Commissioner Sanchez?
No.
Mayor Trujillo?
Yes.
So what is
It
Paul?
So this evening, it does not pass. James, go ahead and move forward.
Yes, sir.
Can I have a motion? Excuse me.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion for Resolution 2018-30, approval of JF Maddox Foundation Agreement for the Cinco de Mayo grant.
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Evelyn, did you have a discussion?
I can handle this, sir.
Okay.
What this particular resolution will do is the EDC has received a grant through the JF Maddox Foundation for the Cinco de Mayo celebration. What this resolution does is authorize the city manager to execute the grant agreement between the city and JF Maddox, where we would act as the fiscal agent. It's a $5,000 grant directly towards the performance, and then a $5,000 matching grant that the EDC would have to provide contributions, dollar for dollar match. But there is no cost to the city.
Is there any questions of the commissioner? Any discussion? Arthur? Good. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion for Resolution 2018-31, temporary street closure, block party permit for Wedding Central Avenue, April 21st, 2018.
I'll second that.
Have a motion and a second.
Mayor and Commissioners, Ms. Everson is wanting to get married. As requested, the Central be closed from Main to Love Street on April 21st for the duration of her wedding. So there's been no issues or conflicts that staff have identified, and we recommend approval.
Any discussion by the board?
Congratulations.
Martin?
I'm for it.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion for accounts payable.
Second.
Gary?
If I may, your mayor and commission, I want to wait just a moment to make sure everybody's able to see the report on their machines. Are you? I don't want to repeat what I did last time where I got halfway through my list. Is everyone able to see all the items on the payables report?
Get a little smaller print.
Yeah, we were trying to get it down to 8 point.
Where is it?
On the plus.
There were so many bills we had to pay. One of the positives about this particular report, if I may, is the fact that it's only $218,991, which of course is a lower amount. And one thing I appreciate about this is we have an accounts payable clerk that's really staying on top of some bills, and we're really catching up on a lot of things. And we're at a place now where I think we're going to see this as a more normal trend. Of course, there'll always be things like debt service payments and things like that that drive our payables up. However, in this particular case, this is, I think, getting us closer to a norm. If you can see on the first page that the CES is actually our largest payment on this particular payables, the $52,658. That was primarily for engineering costs related to 3 different projects, one to Love Street, North Commercial, and then North 17th Street. Another item of interest on the first page is the Dana Nepper. Basically, we always buy supplies from them, but of course it's a little more than usual. We had to buy a couple more meters than the norm in this particular case. And I really like the item there that says DEMCO, which we don't normally see that often, but our library, it has a grant reimbursement that we get, and we're tracking some expenditures, and DEMCO is one of the agencies that we're buying, book supplies from. When you flip to the second page, where we skip over to, you'll see the RPC CPAs and consultants on there for the $18,000. What I love about that is that was our final payment for this last fiscal year's audit. The state auditor requires that we have our audit presented before the commission and that they've reviewed it and approved it before we can make a final payment. And then, of course, one thing that's interesting is the START traffic expenditure of the $11,808. We found some really new barricades, and so we bought several barricades for the streets that are portable and very useful, so that's what that expense is for. And then with the Tyler Technologies, although Commissioner Campos isn't here, we have a payment related to the judicial municipal courts, and they have a separate contract from the city, so this is their maintenance agreement payment on there for the $3,168. If you have any other questions, we're available for answers.
Pretty good. So let's get it paid.
Getting close to the end of the year, how's our cost factor? Have we gone down and so forth on our cost factor to running the city, doing city business? How's that look like?
Well, that's kind of a tricky question. A lot depends on what you mean by cost factor. So if you mean just general operating costs, a couple of the factors that have been out of our control that we still have to pay for, things like electricity, the rates have gone up. gas rates have gone up. So those are a couple of things that we have no control over. But at the moment, I don't have a real clear picture to share with you about our overall cost. The main thing I can share is our conservative budget. Everyone's doing a good job of staying within their budget, and we should come out at the end of this fiscal year under budget.
So all in favor of paying the bills?
Aye.
Any opposed? Bills paid. Do I have another motion?
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion we adjourn.
Second. Motion second. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Just go to Lovington. Dot.
Ours is fine.
Yeah, forget the Y. If you go to that other place, you will get some visuals to inspect. And hey, just because David's got